Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where you're based. Welcome to AVPN's first South Asia Impact Capital Festival. I'm Komal Sahu, Chief of Sustainable Finance at AVPN, and your MC for this session, and I'm delighted to have you join us today. For those of you who do not know about AVPN, we're a network of funders and resource providers with over 600 members across 32 markets. Our mission is to move more capital towards impact in Asia by providing social investors like yourselves opportunities to connect with key stakeholders across various markets and sectors, to learn from one another and find opportunities for action. We're also sharing our highlights of our day live on Twitter, so don't forget to share your experience with us by using the hashtags AVPN South Asia 2021 and hashtag social impact. Throughout this month, the festival highlighted best practices and solutions that AVPN members are delivering across India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. We addressed issues ranging from healthcare, livelihoods, climate action, and education, which are of particular urgency for this sub-region today. A few housekeeping announcements before we move on to the program. To download any resources, please click on the download icon in the agenda page besides the session title. Our partners have set up virtual booths with useful guides and resources. Please click on Festival Partners tab to chat with the relevant partner representatives. To continue chatting with your speakers and fellow delegates in the session, please make full use of the messaging function or the event feed in the platform. Finally, please note that this session will be recorded and you will be able to access the recordings after the festival. This is our penultimate session of our very first South Asia Impact Capital Festival. In this session, we will be discussing the new avenues of impact investing in education that have enabled implementation of innovative solutions for critical issues plaguing education. To start off the discussion, I would like to introduce the moderator for this session, Sandeep Aneja, Managing Director of Kaizen West. Welcome, Sandeep. Sandeep will be speaking with Chandula Abevikrama, CEO of Lanka Impact Investing Network, and Justin Chang, Director of Social Finance at Ubs Optimus Foundation. Sandeep, it's over to you to please moderate the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Komal. Thank you, AVPN. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to chat about education investing and education impact, which are two topics very dear to my heart. And I'm Sandeep, as Komal mentioned, started Kaizen West 10 years ago, and we've so far managed 3 funds, including 2 private equity funds targeting South and Southeast Asia, and 1 private debt fund, which is ongoing in Sub-Saharan Africa. So we've understood what it takes to invest across different asset class in education, different segments, and understand how we can impact lives for the better through both equity and debt in education across 2 continents. It's a pleasure to be here because I believe sincerely that we've got a very exciting panel with Justin representing Ubs Optimus. They have done some amazing work, and Chandula representing Lanka Impact Investment Network. Love to hear from both of them as their experiences. I'll tell you a bit more about what we think around impact in education, but first, Chandula, over to you. Would you be so kind as to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Sandeep. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Chandula Bevikrama. So I am a banker by profession with a career over 35 years. And I've been expert in the area of financial inclusion. And after my banking career, I moved into creating Sri Lanka impact investing landscape as to support the social entrepreneurship. And I co-founded this TV reality show called At Power Like a Shark Tanks and Dragon's Den, which is for social entrepreneurs and impact investors in Sri Lanka, which became the most successful TV program in the country. And I'm an impact investor myself, and I'm also a social entrepreneur. I'm also expert in financial inclusion in Asia.
Thank you, Chandula. Great introduction. Over to you, Justin. I was speaking on mute, so.
No problem, Sandeep. Lovely to have everybody here, and thank you so much for having me. As some of the audience may realize, we were supposed to have Dandava attend, but unfortunately couldn't make it. But I'm hoping to hopefully share insights of the Ubs Optimus Foundation for everybody. In terms of the Ubs Optimus Foundation, for those who may not know of us, we are a dedicated foundation connected to UBS, the global investment bank and wealth manager. Ubs Optimus Foundation has been around for over 20 years, and we work across around 20 countries and have deployed around 200 grants right now. Specifically for myself, I cover the social finance work for Optimus Foundation here in the region. I come from a finance accounting background, but have spent 6-7 years working in foundations and spending a lot of time meeting some great people in the sector. So it's a real privilege to be able to help combine both, the financial and the social together. So obviously we can mobilize capital for good. So it's a real pleasure to be here and join this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. So I'll dive right into impact in education. So for us who invest in education, impact is right at the center of what we do. We define impact as an ability to change the lives of individuals, societies, and the planet. We think education as an SDG 4 form sits right in the center of its ability to transform societies, transform individual lives, and the planet. We think education has the ability to drive a conversation which is more meaningful, which is more logical, and which is more wholesome and inclusive. And with that thought process, we've divided education impact at Kaizenvest into 3 components. One is access, second is quality, third is relevance. Most emerging markets are generally dealing with access issues where we are trying to get everybody across socioeconomic classes, across learning abilities, across the 2 genders included in the process of learning. However, while a lot of the markets globally have tackled the access problem, the quality problem is definitely one to be tackled still. And quality is interesting because it has to do with the interaction between the learner and the learning provider. And that interaction has to provide the right learning quality metrics and improve the learner's learning outcomes from a base set to a level which is measurably improved directly related to the learning provided. Therein lies a measurement and evaluation challenge, which we shall be discussing as part of the discussions with UBS, some of the work UBS has done, and Justin will be throwing some light on that. Lastly, but very importantly, as we rise education, take education up from the bridging the access barrier, overcoming the quality challenges, what we still have to tackle is the relevance of education towards providing a better livelihood, better planet to all of us, and we're heading in that direction. With that lofty goal, I would like to pick the brains of some of the thinkers we have here. And Chandala, maybe starting with you, going right to the brass tacks, just to get a better sense for some of the areas within education that Lanka Impact Investments Network has found ripe for impact investing. Would you help us understand that a little bit?
Yes. Now, if you look at our country, Sri Lanka, we have something comparatively different to some of the other countries in South Asia. We have the free education system from the primary to the university for everybody. And it's only the fluent upper middle class and people overseas to the other universities. But basically, include the university. I myself have been a beneficiary of the free education of the university. So as a result of that, what we have, my professional engagement, what we have found is it's more tilted toward the academic education and produces number of people with so many certifications and qualifications. But with regard to the employability and entrepreneurability, there have been number of challenges, people who are coming out of the universities and the various levels of education certification. So our task was to kind of really make sure to create an impact on the education. It depends on the final outcome should be employability as well as entrepreneurability. So we work with the little bit of not on the lower level of the primary or secondary, but the university level in order to make them like something a little bit like the German dual education system mechanism to make them more entrepreneurial as well as employable. And we work with a couple of institutions at the university level, as well as the chambers, to ensure there are more skill level output is put it for the private sector and the public sector institutional engagement for the mainly for the industries and the respective sectors of the industry, whether it's agriculture or the hospitality, all these sectors, which is the opportunity comes. So we work with the number of universities to ensure that level of support mechanism. So what we did was focus on the two areas. One is making them finally employable and entrepreneurable, and then working with number of universities as well as the chambers to support that mechanism to make them make these people who coming up from the universities to immediately probably employable, and some of them who want to start their enterprises make entrepreneurable and then create access and the structure for that. Only we worked on as a key initiative for that. We want to create some sort of a national education of, because there we see number of people coming out of the universities and the schools, but they find that they are not employable, and some of them are not really entrepreneurable as well. So we found there's a missing link that is prevails for them to cross that bridge, and that's what we were looking at, partnering with the chambers and the universities to uh, uh, kind of come up with that gap and support that through our engagement to kind of support the education, commercialization of the education.
Thank you, Chandula. And very quickly summarizing what you said and moving on to Justin. So impact is really pretty broad in the spectrum. From the one hand, it is really about improving education itself for the learners, which what you're focusing on with the objective of driving entrepreneurship and employability. And on the other hand, it has the ability to impact society and change society on its own. So that is the breadth of education's impact spectrum. Justin, moving on to the work that Ubs Optimus Foundation has done and focusing first on the Quality India Initiative Development Impact Bond. Would you please focus on that and help us understand some of the lessons you picked up there and how that has acted as a test bed for Ubs Optimus to take those lessons globally?
Sure, Sandeep. So for those who may not be aware of the Quality Education India Development Impact Bond, this is the world's largest development impact bond focusing on education. It is really about trying to make sure that we are able to achieve measurable learning outcomes for over 200,000 children in India. And the important thing about this program of ours, and I think it's probably a better word to describe it as a pay for success contract as opposed to bond, just to help the audience also understand. This is a contractual obligation where the risk investor, Optimus Foundation, has provided upfront capital to the full service providers to deliver on the outcomes. And if successful, then the outcome payer will pay us back the upfront cost as well as a return. And what's crucial about this amazing, sort of very innovative project is how it's really bringing the collaboration together of all the sectors. And in India, this is crucial for us to be able to demonstrate in order to take the lessons and learnings across to other parts of the region. If I go into actual sort of firstly how this development impact bond has been progressing, we are now in the second year of the 4-year program, and our year 2 results showed that the students who are part of the development impact bond of the QEI development impact bond program are actually learning twice as fast as those in comparable schools. And one of the key fundamental reasons why we're seeing these outcomes and these results is because of the way in which we as the risk investor are providing the capital for the service providers, for the NGOs, to really focus on these outcomes. And as Chandula mentioned, these outcomes, these ones are specific to the learning, positive learning change we're seeing in the students. And why this is super important for us to also use as a way to think about how we take it across the region is ultimately it's about scaling. And one of the challenges I think that we do see in regards to, potentially taking this to scale is perhaps still the, some of the misconceptions around projects like, development impact bonds, where they're very expensive and costly to develop. I think this is one of the things that we are seeing has proven to be one of the challenges for us to take into other parts of the region. However, that said, we are definitely seeing a huge change in this sector, which is the emergence of outcome funds. And perhaps Sandeep is something we could talk about later, which I think the audience might be interested to learn more about. But outcome funds are really the missing ingredient to the world of impact bonds or pay for success contracts. And because of these outcome funds, we are seeing an ability to develop and to implement more of these development impact bonds across other parts of Asia. Personally, I'm looking at projects in Southeast Asia and working very closely with intermediaries as well. But we're very much taking the learnings from the QEI DIB as well as our first development impact bond, Educate Girls. And I guess the second real key learning from it is really making sure we are still listening to those in the community. And we're really making sure that we're not distracted from, what some may call a complex structure, but ultimately simply really trying to make sure the capital is going to NGOs or social purpose organizations that deserve it. And they're rewarded by making sure that through the successful program implementation, they had the ability to attract future funding as well. And that is ultimately the goal of this type of structure.
That's very meaningful. Because we cannot see the audience, what I'll do is very quickly summarize the breadth of what we heard here. So on the one hand, we've got Chandala talking about taking individuals one at a time and training them into being entrepreneurs and better employed. On the other hand, Justin with UBS, their organization is taking a system-wide approach to enhancing how the system works and bringing new accountability to the system, leveraging finance at play and an innovative finance model at play. So what you've heard so far are some very starkly different, and again, showing you the breadth of what's possible in education impact. Going to Chandala, back to you. I would love to understand from you how you are teaching something that is actually a good mix of soft and hard skills, soft and technical skills, something called entrepreneurship. How are you teaching that? What are your methods? What are you essentially focusing on with the learners? If you could help us understand that a little bit better, that'd be great.
Yeah, so in order to really kind of, but I would want to fast track this whole process of entrepreneurship. It was relatively new, though we have so many entrepreneurs and enterprises, businesses in the country at the SME level, as well as the commercial, as well as the corporate level. But the growth of the entrepreneurship compared to other countries, we are very slow. So in order to kind of showcase the entrepreneurship as well as particularly in the area of social entrepreneurship, we were looking at how do we do this awareness creation. That is why I pioneered this entity, TV reality show called at Power, on the same fashion of the Shark Tanks and Dragon's Den. And we had the same way where entrepreneurs we created awareness of this. And when we got the models of entrepreneurs to come and pitch their enterprise and showcase and, and have an opportunity for them to have access to private equity from the most successful businessmen in the country. We had 20 businessmen, very corporate level, and they were able to kind of, when these young entrepreneurs come there, take about their enterprises and ask for the idea. And these successful investors who became impact investors was able to communicate and educate these young entrepreneurs when they say, this is my enterprise, this is what I want to do, and I need this amount of equity. And then we ran this program. Now we ran two seasons. We became #1 business program in the country with about reaching nearly 6 million audience. And it became a hit, and we have got so many awards from the national level. And it became real education because it's real online, real-time education, because the successful investors, the corporate leaders, were able to transfer their knowledge to these young up-and-coming entrepreneurs at the social entrepreneur level. So that became very successful, and people began to see how the successful entrepreneur can be and identifying the method, as well as emerging entrepreneurs can learn from the successful entrepreneurs. So that this program became a massive awareness creation about the entrepreneurship, apart from the be focusing on social entrepreneurship. So that's why we felt that, and then the chambers got in, and many others came on board, and many other partners came on board, like UNDP and other engagement partners, and we became a really practical, I would say, ground for the entrepreneurship showcase. And because we were able to bring 20 of the Sri Lanka's successful top-level businessmen, giving their knowledge, how they successfully create enterprises to become corporate level, to the young and emerging entrepreneurs for their ideas and creating access to capital. That's the way that we did that knowledge transfer from a practical perspective, because we know you can do entrepreneurship degree or diploma, but I think it is best that the successful businessman transferring that knowledge, and when it's done on the television as a TV reality show, and really giving them equity, and it related something really revolutionary to them. So that's something which we felt first time in this country, and the first time also we gave access to private equity to micro, small, and medium level social entrepreneurs.
Chandla, that's very meaningful and powerful. Well done. Looks like you have been able to not only leverage the experts and provide real life experience examples to the learners, but you've also been able to empower them with real knowledge of entrepreneurship. So intrinsically and extrinsically motivating them and producing a holistic learning environment. So congratulations to you. Justin, moving back to you, I've got a quick segue from what we discussed. I'm going to ask you a surprise question and go back into what we had thought about. The surprise question has to do with the three colors of capital, I see, which ABPN also has spoken about: debt, grants, and equity for improving and enhancing a sector, education in particular. What do you think is your prognosis, your sort of prediction of what's going to happen to grant capital role in driving impact in education over the next few years? And where do you see debt and equity playing? So not too long, but would love to know what you think.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, Sandeep. And I know ABPN, they tag this to continuum capital, the spectrum of capital, which I think is a really powerful way to look at it. I think in brief, grant capital has still a fundamental role in the sense that it needs to be able to support organizations where they don't perhaps have that track record that debt and equity investors are looking for. Fundamentally, there's no problem with capital out there. There's plenty of capital. The issue right now that we're seeing at Optimus, and I'm sure other colleagues on the session right now will understand, is there's a lack of investable opportunities. And we can't constantly try and expect these investees to become ready to absorb the types of demands that debt and equity require. And that's where grant capital plays a crucial role. I think the other quick thing to share on this is I think there's a role to blend both of them together. So I don't think we should be seeing them as in silos. I do think that there is a way where we can combine the capitals together. So perhaps grant capital can be used as a first loss concession capital, and most people may have heard of the concept of blended finance. And that then hopefully then allows to catalyze, the more, I guess, market return seeking investors. And as we all know with the SDGs, there's a crucial funding gap that's required. And that's obviously a big reason why Optimus Foundation is focused on social finance, because we think that there's a very important role to blend both grant and investment capital.
Fully agree with that, Justin. That's where we are headed. In fact, one of our projects in South Africa is currently a blended finance project with a theory of change, which I shall talk about a little later. But going back to you again, because this is the thought process which continues from where we started, the development investment bond you spoke about. One of the critical aspects of getting the bond right is, particularly if it's a performance-linked bond, is to get the metrics right, outcome metrics right up front. And then the second aspect of that is getting measurement right. Would you throw some light on your experiences, your lessons from that?
Yeah, sure. So for those who perhaps outcomes, just to make sure the audience are clear what this means, outcomes are perhaps the actual what change has happened to the beneficiaries as opposed to an output or quantity. So if we were to say there's 10,000 children who are benefiting from the program, that's an output. The outcome is that we've seen, say, an 80% improvement in literacy rates. So the importance of the outcome is to really make sure that we can develop the evidence base to support verifying that achievement. And that's crucial, particularly in a development impact bond structure, because it ensures that the investor side can actually get their money, get the outcome payments. But as Sandeep's, I guess implying with this question is, in reality, it's different. In reality, it can be quite a challenge. Aligning everybody up front is crucial because it avoids, impact, green, color washing, whatever we want to call it, to make sure we're all very clear and targeted, on what we're trying to achieve with this program. However, ultimately, what we're really trying to make sure is that, everybody's aligning to the bigger vision to create a greater collaboration. And this collaboration is crucial because that is then how we ensure that the measurement will be viewed and assessed in a realistic way. And what do I mean by that? So, the reality is, a lot of service providers, NGOs, they have very little time. They're heavily resource constrained. And to look for them to do this level of in-depth, data capture or impact measurement everyone's talking about, it takes a lot of effort and time. So I think there's an important recognition, particularly from the investor side, that we need to give them some kind of support around this. So that the question I raised to the audience is, do we, particularly there's other funders in this session right now, do we need to take more of a human approach, let's say, with the way in which we communicate measurement of outcomes to our investees or grantees? Do we need to think about, how to invest further in their capabilities? And really look to realistically help them get to that point where they do have the systems, they do know how to capture the data, which obviously the measurement side to confirm obviously the outcomes. And that's obviously something Optimus, we're also trying to look at right now, building the capacity of our grantees, because it is ultimately, a crucial aspect, as you rightly say, Sandeep. We have to be able to measure these outcomes. There's no point in having the outcomes you can't measure it.
Absolutely. And I think measurement evaluation is easier said than done, as we are realizing in our own project, but it's a very critical part of ensuring accountability. Chandula, I'm going to come back to you, please, and request you to bring your thoughts from the perspective of a financial inclusion expert, because I believe you have that hat to wear as well, and which can be used towards providing an insight towards understanding how you are using that expertise to bring better impact to education through your work in Sri Lanka.
Yes, but I would see in the area of financial inclusion, that, I should correctly mention about the debt, the grants, and the capital access. So what I have seen, particularly in our part of the world, the South Asia, I call the AAA, making financial services available, accessible, and affordable. And I think that's where the challenge is, to making financial services available to and affordable and accessible to more people in more places more often. That is the challenge that most of the financial inclusion providers face with. And also in the area of education, there is significant gaps between the what is taught, and once finally they are come through the university or the school or the college, whether they can match to the market expectations, whether they can become in the area of agriculture, the hospitality, whatever the engineering, the medicine, whatever the areas, whether how there's a big mismatch between the education providing, obtaining the students, as well as what the market requires. So most often when the market, the problems in the society or the marketplace cannot be resolved by some of the people who come from these universities and these colleges as freshers. So there's a missing link. So that's where I feel that it's important to not only the institutions that create access to finance, making financial service available and affordable, also to make sure that this missing gap or the missing kind of stones that between making this education institutions more preparing the students for the marketplace to become problem solvers, like in the area of agriculture, in the area of medicine, in the area of, say, ecotourism, whatever areas. Some of the people who are coming out with education institutions, they are not problem solvers. They just want to find a job somewhere and write something and get some salary at the end of the day. So what the world needs is people to resolve problems in the society. And that's the impact that we are looking for. And that is where we need to tilt that on that toward that side. And the impact investors, impact investing institutions also really work with the education institutions toward that, making the students or the output from the education institution to match the social requirements.
Excellent, Chandala. Very, very well said. I like the AAA, availability, accessibility, and affordability. Those are three great metrics. And clearly with that, you can bring more people under the educated umbrella than not. And clearly, you know what you're talking about is very valuable. Delivering education that gets people employed and valuable immediately as opposed to getting a degree. Justin, I'm going to ask you something which you can perhaps help us understand better about lessons transfer from one region to another, particularly what your experience has been, what's positive, what's negative. And we are about 4 minutes away from wrapping up. So then we'll get to a wrap up after that, soon after.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sandeep. I'll make this very quick. So I think, the main lesson that we're learning, and we're going through, and it's a big learning curve at the end of the day, is the difference between perhaps the regulatory, regulatory frameworks and policies in place. There's obviously varying levels of understanding, particularly when it comes to impact investing. It's definitely in the headlines, and I think people have heard of it, but I still think the reality of it is maybe not as well understood. And particularly, in our part of the world, philanthropy and investment, they're kind of separated. So I think there's this kind of education thing that's also having to take place as well. But I think on a positive, there's no doubt we're seeing an incredible, huge interest in impact investing, sustainable, finance. No doubt what's happened with COVID has shifted mindsets to very much about, how a profit-making entity is actually benefiting society. So that's a really positive change. So because of that momentum, I think the work that we're looking obviously to roll out from India into other parts of the region, it's really riding that wave of interest, you could say. But definitely there's still a need to make sure we have strong levels of education and actually telling people really why we're doing this, which at the end of the day it really is about making positive social and measurable outcomes for the most vulnerable. I think that's ultimately what this is all about.
Right, and we've learned so many lessons. What we've learned also is that picking up the entities from India which have expertise in aspects of education impact, using their expertise to create local expertise and capacity building opportunity is something we utilize to make sure that the local systems are scalable.
And we see India as a crucial strategic market for us. We have a lot of work. We're building our team there as well. Because India for us is really one of the most conducive places for us to really trial a lot of these innovative financing programs.
Yeah. Chandala, back to you. You've got a minute to help us understand one line or two lines of how you view where you see impact in education headed.
I think there has to be a revolution created here to education institutions to understand what the market requirement is, and based on that, prepare their the students towards that.
Excellent. And Justin, same for you. Where do you think we're headed in education impact? What's the next big thing?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a need to make it more modern and to actually recognize more practical aspects, high level or 21st century behavioral skills and these things. And I think impact investing can definitely support that need.
Yeah, absolutely. And entrepreneurship as opposed to employability is a key driver towards including impact and including softer skills and cognitive skills in a human being, which make them more meaningful to society in the long run. And lastly, I would like to put a little plug in for us. We are working on putting together a community of practice around our Kaizen-West theory of change in education, and love to invite all of you and audience members to participate in that, so we can make this community of practice drive an open source theory of change framework that we're putting out to the market in the next month. Love to have your feedback. Again, thank you, AVPN, for the opportunity. And I guess we have a minute or so left, but anybody wants to go ahead and wrap it up? Chandala, anything further to add from your side?
No, as I repeatedly told, I think we need to make sure that the enormous need as a result of the COVID-19 in the society, and we need to change the way we educate children to resolve problems in the world.
Good, right on time. Thank you. Thank you, Chandala. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, ABPN. Handing the podium back to you, Jen.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for the session. I want to give a big thank you to Sandeep for being such a thoughtful moderator and guiding this conversation to bring out such incredible insights from Justin and Chandala, who have such vast knowledge on investing in education. This session was made possible with the kind support of our festival partners, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Sesame Workshop India, the Rockefeller Foundation, COVID Action Collab, V&V Advisory Services, the British Asian Trust, WWP India CSR Foundation, Catalyst Management Services, and SATVA. I definitely think 30 minutes is not enough time for this discussion. So if you want to continue chatting with our speakers, our fellow delegates in this session, please make full use of the messaging and meeting functions on our festival platform. Do share your insights and your highlights of this session on social media, and do remember to tag us using the hashtags AVPN South Asia 2021 and hashtag social impact. Up next, our final session on innovative finance mechanisms and the role of CSR, the Haryana Development Impact Bond, will be starting at 6:20 p.m. India Standard Time. You can go to the next session by clicking on the session button on the right side of your screen next to the chat and Q&A box. You will see a button to join the next session. Thank you all, and please enjoy the rest of the festival.